Thank you, Danny, for your presentation. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Grace Wachira, PG first year. So, the reason why I started with the temperature chart is because you're going to see that his temperatures were all over the place. But you will note that on 3 specific occasions, actually his temperatures are 36.7, 35.7. Now, the most interesting thing is that every time the abscesses would be drained, the following day his fevers would actually calm down, then they go back up 2 to 3 days later. So we have done a myriad of investigations for this child. So when the child came on the 12th. So when we did the blood slide for malaria parasite, it was negative, but the MRDT was actually positive. Now, if you realize that when the child came, he had a Glasgow Coma scale of, it was actually 11. So when the random blood sugar was done, it was at 2. So the child was given 10% dextrose. Now, on the 16th, if you remember that our child had very high fevers that were up and down. So we decided to do a typhoid test, that is the immunoglobulin M and the IgG, and they were both negative. The child also had a hepatomegaly that was tender, and he had jaundice. So we decided to do our hepatitis B, a surface antigen, which was also negative. We also did hepatitis A, and you realize that they were actually all negative. Now, also due to the fevers, so we decided to do a urine analysis. He had just ketones 1+, most probably it was because he has not been feeding well. He did not have any proteins, he did not have any glucose in the urine, but he had granulocast. And his stool, which was brown, no ova and cyst, was seen. Now, due to the temperatures also going up and down, we did malaria blood site on separate occasions, but the only one that was actually positive was on the 13th, but the MRDT was negative. So maybe the child either got it from the ward, or just maybe it was from, he had been transfused on multiple occasions before. So as for the liver function test, the albumin was low at 19 grams per deciliter. For it to be normal, at least it should be 30 grams, above 30 grams per deciliter, per liter. Now, this is a child who had edema and is also a child with severe acute malnutrition. So now, when you come to the management, you're going to see that we did not give this child albumin due to several factors that we're going to discuss about. So the ALP was high, the ALT was also slightly high. So in short, with the liver function test, it showed that there was injury to the liver, which we were not sure what the cause was. Because as you remember, the hepatitis was, all the hepatitis parameters were actually negative. So we also did full blood count, which was follow-up. And as you can see, when the child came, he did not have, everything was on the normal side, except for the HB, which was a bit low at 11.1. Then when we did it a few weeks later, on the 24th, now we had WBCs that were actually high. So all the parameters had increased, but now the HB had come low. So was it because of the infectious process that the child was going through, or was it because of the MEPI plus the malaria that the child had? But after almost 2 weeks later, once we repeated it, everything was on the normal side, but the HB had also come down to 6 grams per liter, which was actually lower than the admitting hemoglobin. But you will note that actually now the child had developed tea-colored urine. So maybe the child was hemolyzing, but we were not also very sure about it, of what was causing the hemolysis. So other investigations are going to show you. So this is a child who we did culture and sensitivity, also due to the high fevers. Now, the ascitic fluid actually did not reveal anything much. It just revealed that it was an exudate due to the high proteins of 450 milligrams per deciliter and the WBCs of 105 cells per millimeter cubed. but it did not grow anything, and we did not have acid-fast bacilli seen. But the differentials, it was predominantly lymphocyte, which just showed that it was an inflammatory process that was going on. So we also did blood cultures on the 28th, and there was no bacteria, nothing grew even after 5 days of inoculation. So you're going to see that in part of the management, this being a liver abscess, the abscesses were actually drained on several occasions. And once we did the pass swab for culture and sensitivity, it just showed gram stain, 2 inflammatory cells, but no organisms were seen and no bacteria grew. So a gene expert was also done on the acetic tap, and no TB was seen, and on the gastric aspirate also no NTB was seen. So now we have, this is a multidisciplinary child because we were not exactly sure of what was going on. So we involved the radiology team and the surgical team and the hem-onco team. So now for the radiological and surgical follow-up, so the radiological team on the 18th, that is a few days after the child came, actually did an abdominal ultrasound, and it showed multiple liver cysts, cystic masses, plus moderate ascites. So a few days after, when they came to redo the abdominal ultrasound on the 28th, it actually showed large cystic lesions on the left lobe with internal echoes. So about this, we have our radiological team is here. They're going to explain more about it. So, and then we had hepatoechoic solid lesions on the right lobe, and there was no color flow towards them. And of course, our child had ascites. So on the 28th, that was the very first time that the drained pus, which was 800 mils, that was drained. And if you remember, in the cultures, nothing grew in the pus, and they did not see any organisms in the pus. So now, that was on the 28th. On the 29th, they repeated another ultrasound, and they actually found that where they had drained the pus, it had fluid had collected again. So on the 30th, we involved the pediatric surgical team, and they requested that we do a chest X-ray and we repeat an abdominal ultrasound, and they were also to discuss with the radiological team on a pigtail catheter. I'm sure the team will explain better what a pigtail catheter is. But generally it is just to drain the pus. It is left there continuously in the liver. So now this was on the 30th. On the 31st, more pus was aspirated, and it was at 200 mils, and it was, of course, all these aspirations are done with the ultrasound. And then now on the 1st, the surgical team came and they said we repeat the CBCs, which generally were on the normal side except for the HB that was on the lower side. So now, because of the HB being, now this was after the CBC was repeated, the HB was at 7.7. So the ped surgery team requested that we transfuse, because again we were supposed to repeat another aspirate. So we transfused packed red blood cells at 10 mils per kg. So they still requested that we insert a pigtail catheter. Then on the 4th, we drained again 180 mils, but now this time it was less of pus and more of blood. And now there were also some pockets of pus and fluid that were also evacuated. So now on the 7th, we repeated again an ultrasound, which showed a hepatomegaly of 11.9 centimeters, but we still had multiple cystic masses, and they also had now the internal echoes, with the largest being 10.2 by 7.6 centimeters. And we had a mild right pleural effusion, and we still had our ascites, and the child has an umbilical hernia. So it was repeated again, and it almost showed the same picture on the right and left lobe. But now, if you notice, the hepatomegaly before was at 11.9 centimeters, and the latest, which was actually done yesterday, now showed that the hepatomegaly had enlarged slightly, but maybe it's because the edema is actually coming down. So it was at 13.6 centimeters, But now if you realize, the other times we had multiple, but now we have 2 thin-walled cystic masses that were occupying the right. So the largest was actually on the right and encroaching on the left lobe, but also the left lobe has one. So the largest cystic mass was at 8.3 by 5.6 centimeters. So that was all about now how we've managed the child radiologically and surgically. So if you remember on the 13th about the hypoglycemia, this was how the child was managed. And we gave the child, due to the high fevers that had been persistent, even if the BS for MPS was negative and the MRDT was positive, we still gave the child artesunate. So the first differential was enteric fever. So we started the child on ciprofloxacin and metronidazole. So on the first, 2 weeks had already been completed of ciprofloxacin, so we stopped it. Our child still had fevers that were going on, and the child was not really improving. So we put our child on IV cloxacillin. So on the 24th, the hemato-oncological review team came. Now, we did a peripheral blood film. If you remember, there was a family history of sickle cell disease. And also the child's HB coming down despite us giving blood. Plus also now the child had T-colored urine. We needed to know what was going on. So they did a peripheral blood film, and they also asked for cytology of the acidic fluid. And if you remember, there was nothing much that was seen on cytology. So for the peripheral blood film, it did not show much actually, but we did not get the results, so we are still looking for them there somewhere. So now, the child from admission until approximately 4 weeks down the line, the child actually, the gross ascites progressed to Anasaka. And the child now was actually now bedridden and was not moving much. So we decided to give the child spironolactone at 25 milligrams. Then now, cloxacillin, they were getting it for themselves. But since the hospital had flucamox, we switched it to IV flucamox, but we still continued with our IV metronidazole because of the abscesses that were still present. So if you remember on the 13th, the blood slide for malaria parasite was actually positive, so we started the child on artesunate. And once it was over on the 16th, we went to Coartem. Now, we had the same impressions on all those days, but as per now where we are, our child, the impressions is we have multiple liver abscesses, we have resolving malaria, we have severe acute malnutrition, which is edematous with severe stunting. And from the history, this child has been sick from the word go, because the mother there were 3 children, he's the last born, so the mother went with the 2 girls and left the son with the auntie. So, and the aunt says that from the word go, this child had been sick, and due to the multiple admissions. So now we want to rule out the primary immunodeficiencies. And financially, the mother is not very stable, but if we get financing, we are planning to do maybe a CT scan of the abdomen, just to be really sure and pinpoint where the abscesses are, and maybe if there is generally just what is going on in the abdomen. Then we can do, for the primary immunodeficiencies, if possible, we can do CD4 differentials, we can do our IgM, IgG, and IgE, and so that we can know exactly what is going on.